This is Georgina Rose, and welcome to the Postmodern Iconoclast, a podcast that helps you destroy and break the false icons and idols of the digital age in search of a more authentic, esoteric spirituality. On this podcast, we discuss ideology, esoterica, and everything on the fringes of mysticism, religion, and related topics. Hello and welcome to the show. In this episode, we're going to be talking about something that I've touched on, and some of my guests have touched on a little bit in this show, but never actually deep dived into, and that would be the connection between spirituality and health. I truly believe that when we talk about our spiritual journeys, our spiritual paths, our growth, it is more than just, doing the meditation, saying the affirmations. There is more in our life that connects to this stuff than the actual act of like doing spirituality. I think our modern mind likes to compartmentalize things in a way that in reality things are not compartmentalized. And so I wanted to have someone on who understands health and knows a bit more than I do to discuss, this connection and how we can understand this connection and how we as people who are interested in spirituality can learn to, better our paths through our health, understanding it, and tapping into that conscious connection. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Bailey. I am Ancestor Aligned or Autumn on Twitter. And I'm just all about spirituality, health, motherhood, just you name it, esoteric, and I am all about it.
Just to start with like the most basic question in the world, that would be why does health, our physical health, actually matter when we are interested in spirituality and esotericism?
I would say because our physical body is what grounds our spirit into this realm. So we can't neglect it and then expect ourselves to be spiritually enlightened or to be thriving spiritually when we neglect our bodies and we're not conscious of what we're doing, what we're putting into our bodies in every way, feeding our minds and our bodies. It's going to affect us spiritually. So
I would agree. I've noticed whenever I've gone through periods of time when I was like less focused on my health, because obviously, people go through periods where they're more healthy and less healthy. I've noticed there are always like little ways it affects what I'm doing spiritually. And whenever I, sort of get myself together, I always feel like my health kind of reorients. And I think this mind body connection is something that is so integral. And it's interesting because there are definitely some traditions that kind of emphasize it more than others. And I feel like it's something that we should really like think about and be aware of, because it's almost like how can you fully, be actualizing yourself in any way if you're completely neglecting your physical reality? Because this idea that our physical reality and our spiritual reality are completely dichotomous just kind of isn't true. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We're literally physical manifestations of our spirit. So not only does the physical affect the spiritual, but the spiritual affects the physical. So if you're living in fear, no matter how much you take care of your body, your gut's going to be destroyed, So it goes both ways, and we can't separate that.
Oh yeah, the gut thing is such a thing. I remember growing up, whenever my mom would get super nervous, she would always like have stomach problems. And I remember seeing this as a kid, like whenever she was stressed out, she was like always like running to the bathroom all the time. And I remember when I got to middle school, it started happening to me, and she's like, "Oh, it's just the family nervous belly." And I was like, "What do you mean? Can I like take something for this?" And she's like, "No, no, it's completely psychological." And I was like, "Really? That's crazy."
Yeah, I've been there too. When I first went down the rabbit hole, like really deep in 2017, I destroyed my gut. I really did. It was so bad. I wasn't giving myself any breaks between doing these deep dives that like they really did develop me as a person. Like I actually realized so much about the world, and I don't take that back, but you can't just nosedive. It's not good for your gut, because I was I was throwing up. I couldn't eat certain things for like a whole year. My whole gut microbiome was destroyed. Like I wasn't able to digest so many things I had previously been able to. And it manifested in everything, just everything. You can't fear and expect your body to thrive. It's not spiritually aligned with health.
Absolutely. And there's this big connection, I feel like, between our emotions and our physicality. And this kind of it's interesting because it's very like reciprocal, right? Like if my emotions are bad, my body gets bad. And then of course you get this like, oh my God, my body's bad. And then you develop this like anxiety. And then, when you're in that type of frantic state, it's so hard to focus on like the spiritual. And it's like, how would you like advise? I mean, I guess it's a complicated thing, right? To kind of break the cycles. I feel like it is kind of a cycle, or maybe I'm sort of off track.
Yeah. Cycle. That's what I was thinking. It's a toxic cycle because you're reaffirming it every time you have a fear. And like maybe your fear is like, oh, my body isn't what it should be or whatever. So that would be a fear that makes your body go, oh, well, I'm not what I should be. And then your body is responding to that. And then you're going, oh, yeah, see, it's happening. And it's just like this confirmation cycle that happens and we all fall into so many different ways. I would say if you want to get out of that cycle, you focus on the basics, which is just like water, earth, fire, air, filter your water, ground, do your breath work, find time to breathe, get enough sun, just use your energy wisely and make sure you're feeding yourself good thoughts. And like you can't just feed into those pathways that lead you down to hell, you can't keep beating down the same pathways and expect health. So it's the mind, so the spirit, water, fire, earth, air, it's all the basics. It really is just, and it's feeding into the good cycle, that's all a cycle. The water, earth, fire, air, those are all cycles. And so you need to be in the good cycles, not the bad cycles,
Absolutely. And what's interesting about the sort of things you listed is a lot of them are those like foundational spiritual things, right? You get any spiritual teacher, you read any esoteric books, those are always the sort of, the groundwork that they tell you to do first, right? Learn to meditate, ground yourself. I remember when I was sort of getting interested in this stuff, all the books, and this is because I was kind of reading some older stuff from like 80s, 90s, which isn't like old in the grand sense, but are, not necessarily completely what's coming out now. They would always emphasize like going outside and putting your feet on the ground and grounding in that way, which I know got popular in the 70s. And all that stuff, it really does help you physically, right? Like we need the sun, we need breath. Like in if you even get into like meditation stuff, a lot of that has been surprisingly like accepted by mainstream medical stuff, which a lot of those industries are not the most inclined to recognize spiritual stuff as beneficial for obvious reasons, because now medicine and spirituality are very disconnected, which historically they weren't always. And they really do, it's a lot of the same stuff, which is why I feel like it's kind of crazy when we forget that there's this connection, and we are like, well, I only focus on my spiritual, and people they neglect that physical part when a lot of foundations are kind of the same.
It's so easy to fall into that over spiritualization, especially when you're first getting into spirituality. You think like some people think the physical is completely evil, and that in itself is evil. It's not. It's just a physical manifestation of what's inside. On like every single person is projecting this reality. It's a giant web, and we need to be conscious of it.
Yeah.
And when you're not, and you're only feeding into your own, you're never questioning like a good feeling, you're only you're all love and light. You don't have any fire, you start dipping out of the physical, and your body can even start deteriorating, like these monks that go straight into spirituality, like they go straight up to Kether, then they just skip the whole entire tree of life and they just go straight up the middle. Their bodies are very weak and frail, and it's a beautiful thing on one hand, but it's not what I would do. I think we should. I mean, I wouldn't say should, because everyone's journey is different, but you know what I'm saying?
Oh, completely. I think over spiritualization is a really good word for it because I find when a lot of people get into the esoteric, I did this, I'm turning myself in. You get really excited by it, and you tear through like every single book. You go, you try every practice you can think of, and you get it's good to be excited. It's good to do things. I'm a big advocate of discipline and actually going through with the things and not just studying it, like actually applying it. But can become a little bit of an issue when you do that and you become really like detached and sort of unbalanced, right? You start forgetting about the importance of the material and like the way it all like does balance out. Becoming a monk, if you want to do that, I mean, I'm not going to stop you. Yeah, I would say a lot of them are more disciplined than I could ever imagine to be. But I mean, for most people in the spirituality, that's not the reality. And that's not even what works best or is the will of, I would say, the majority of people into this stuff. And on your point about the material being evil, that is a theological position that has started irritating me more and more recently, actually. And I've become, it's funny, the longer I've been into the esoteric, the more that position has been one that I've taken issue with. Because when I first started out, I was like, okay, I can kind of get where this is coming from, right? I think there's a lot of problems in the world we live in. And I think that there's a lot of things that exist in the material world that are just, I mean, basically poison for us. But I've realized with time, like, if you hate all the things that are created, right? In a sense, you have to hate divinity because I personally I believe that the world we live in is a reflection, it's an emanation of what divinity is. And so if you do that, you end up in a theological position where you kind of you hate creation itself, and it's a very weird, kind of honestly spiritually dark route to take, I would say. And it's just the more I look at it, the more I find it just disconnected, or I guess something that bothers me, I guess.
Yeah, and it's like a huge problem on, like, I'd say the left, like I hate to make this political. I don't want to make it political, but I just see it a lot, and like the people who get really swayed easily by these politicians who are selling this, like, oh yeah, everyone's just love and light, and these people, they don't have any discernment, because they think anything that's good, or that's supposed to be good, like love, there's no way it can be used for evil. And it's like, I think that goes hand in hand with not being grounded in physical reality.
Yeah, love is a tricky thing because love is one of the most powerful things in the world, right? It's beautiful, but love can be twisted and used to manipulate people because it's such a powerful thing that I think, and this I do feel kind of similarly about the left. I think a lot of people on the left have, I would say, good intentions. Like, I don't think that a lot of the people who follow the movement, not the people who lead it, but the people who follow it, really are like horrible people. I think a lot of them are essentially like their heart and their empathy has been exploited and manipulated in a way that then gets twisted and turned into something really dark and totalitarian, and at some points even dangerous, because there really are people who take these things and they're they'll psychologically manipulate you. You know what I mean? Like, I think psyops are totally real, and I think that's something we see a lot, right? And discernment is, I think, the thing that we all need to remember, right? And discernment sometimes means that we have to discern that, wait, maybe the majority of opinion or the thing that we're told to believe might be wrong. Yeah, so a sort of question I wanted to ask you is, um do you think there are specific like diets or ways of eating that are best for spiritual development? Because I've seen like many different spiritual and religious traditions will recommend different stuff, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, what do you think is sort of the way to go? Or do you think like maybe different diets make sense for different paths or something?
Yeah. I think the more primal, the better. But for a spiritual aspect, like spiritually, I think the lighter you can become, the easier it is to channel and to be like clear in your own energy. And so eating light meals to me would be like um, fruits and vegetables, and then water, and just, earth, instead of denser things like meat. Um, but I think that you can still eat meat, and you can have a spiritual experience. And I think that it's more so about balancing on a grander scheme. So having a primal diet is what I think is best, because it's best for what your body needs. And if we're taking that into consideration and remembering that spirituality is, physicality and spirituality can't be separated. So I think your body needs meat. And so that would be best on a long term for your physical body, and therefore your spiritual body. But I've heard so much about how, dense meat can be, and I guess it's just where you get it and what the animals go through and how they're treated. And it really comes down to, growing your own food and making a relationship to it, and being one with the seasons, and, harvesting your own crops, and raising your own cattle, and that at that level, like when you actually get into the intricacies of sustaining your own life, that sustains your spirit, you know.
That makes a lot of sense. I've never been one for vegetarian or veganism. It's never quite made sense to me, and I don't think it's necessarily the best health wise. Though I think for some people they clearly do seem, content with it. But I don't think it's for everyone by any means, which is why I don't partake in it. But I think the thing with
Yeah.
meat, and at least this is my view on it, is I feel like you can eat meat and be spiritual. You just have to have kind of a respect for it and an appreciation
Exactly.
for where it came from, right? Like that animal was alive, and it sort of, it goes through the cycle of life. I'm a big believer in the natural cycles of things, right? We are, we eat animals, animals eat each other, you know what I mean? But I think we still need to respect where it came from and have, I guess, like an appreciation for that thing and try not to fully disconnect. Because I have noticed there's a thing where we're really disconnected. Most people, not everyone, but a lot of people are really disconnected from food production and don't
Yeah.
really think about it. They just think, oh, food is a thing that's here, and they don't ever, contemplate it or meditate on it or think about how did this get to me? Where did this come from?
It disconnects spiritually. It takes away from that appreciation, and you don't get to see everything that what you put into your body, the cycle of their life. And so that kind of disconnects you from your own cycles.
Yeah, I remember I saw an herbalist once for like a thing I was, kind of dealing with medically. And I was talking with her. She's giving me some advice because I really do think herbs have a great healing power. And I think that they have a lot of metaphysical properties. I mean, it's been documented for a long time. Like certain herbs can cleanse, certain can, enact prosperity, and some of that stuff I think is really valuable. So I went to an herbalist first, right? Because I felt like that was the thing to do. It wasn't a major problem I had, but it was enough to be annoying. And I remember she told me, she's like, so you're gonna take this and you're gonna make a tea with it, and you know what I mean? Like if they give you like the prep instructions. And she's like, and before you drink it, it could be really interesting for you, because I know you are kind of a spiritual person, to, like kind of visualize the plant itself and thank the plant and really like reflect on it that. And I tried that, and I did find it kind of made a difference in a way. I felt more in tune with what I was doing, and it became more than just like drinking this tea, right?
Mm-hmm. It sets a whole tone, and it gives you a whole energy that like you didn't appreciate before, that was already there for you to see. And like the plant's there, you know, and most people just don't make that connection with the heart. And the heart is so powerful. You have to put yourself there, you know, you have to know what that feels like, and take it with you in all the things you do. You know, most people are living in survival mode, most like 90% of the time, just in their subroutines. They're not conscious of what they're doing. And when you're conscious of what you're doing, you are actually taking your life and completely changing it. You're like shifting entire paradigm, you know? It's wild to think, you know, people used to pray over their food just like all the time, you know, everyone did it. It was, you know, age of Pisces. And now we're losing that as a society. And I get like why people, you know, have been so put off by religion. And I have felt the same way. I stopped praying like my family did. And you don't even have to pray. Like as long as you, what the point is you're trying, you're thank, thankful, you know, with gratitude. And just that's really what it is people have lost gratitude for just the simple things. Everything's quick, everything's right there for you to grab. It's not, you know, when you work for something, it's like, oh my god, I did this thing, and I'm so happy, and it's here, and I'm finally eating this bountiful feast, and everything that went into it is so crazy. I'm so thankful. And now it's just like, oh well, we're gonna go to Walmart and we're just gonna put it on our plate, and we're gonna stuff our stomachs full to the brim, and not listen to our body's cues. And it's just it's not conscious anymore, you know. I mean, not everyone. There's me and you. there's people like us, but it's crazy to see, you know.
Absolutely. I think like with the way that, you know, the work day is structured, how culture is currently structured, I mean, pretty much everyone is constantly busy. I mean, right now, I mean, so many people I know, you know, they have a job and they have their second job and then they do one of those like, you know, what's it called? The like, you know, like the what is like the there's a term for it. I'm blanking on what it is. It's
TV dinner.
yeah, like something like that, but they're so in this like frenzy all the time, and a lot of them do have bits of time, but they're unable to sort of break that mindset at all, and they give it in this like really complex routine, and they don't, they get detached from like, where does our food come from, where does the, you know what I mean, and they're not focusing, they're not being conscious. And for some people, I mean, that's kind of just how it has to be for, you know, where the world is right now. But if we can, like, even if you're someone who is really busy, right, taking just a little bit of time to be conscious and to reflect and to, you know, break that mindset just for a second, it can be really healing, I think.
Yeah. And people don't know how to do that. They're like a freaking refrigerator hum of anxiety all the time. It's like never shuts off. And so at the weekend, they pound down like drinks to take the edge off, because that's the only way they know how. They don't have a daily practice, and so by the end of the week they're finally ready to just let go, and they poison themselves.
Ab-
And I can't even, it gives me chills because I can't believe it's so normalized that we poison ourselves. And it's literally, you know, Al Ghul, it's spirits, you know, it's demonic possession. I've seen it with my own two eyes. People have been possessed while poisoned to this level, and they're just not there, they're not conscious. And it's absolutely crazy the way that our spirit gets diluted by alcohol. And people would rather dilute their spirits every weekend than just learn a daily practice of letting go, of meditation, you know.
Oh, completely. Alcoholism is it's everywhere. I mean, a lot of people are functioning alcoholics. I think everyone
Yeah.
listening to this probably knows someone, and there are probably some people listening who struggle with it. And it's so normalized. It's like it's almost, I wouldn't say expected, but it's, to be considered an alcoholic in our culture, you have to be like very severely an
Yeah.
alcoholic. And so many people I feel like are kind of dependent on it that I see, right? If someone has a drink every, like, I don't know, special occasion, I mean, I don't necessarily see an inherent issue with that, though I think you should recognize that it is poison and it is, not good for you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't think of it as like healthy. I remember someone said it was healthy because some article said red wine's good for the heart, and I was like, I don't know about that one. Uh,
I've heard that one. I don't know about it either.
yeah, I'm a little skeptical of that, but yeah, alcohol is we normalize, and even beyond alcohol, we normalize a lot of just poison in our culture. It's like it's acceptable and encouraged, and it's
Yeah.
it's so baked into like our social structure too. Like in terms of drinking, like a lot of people's social lives are built around drinking. If you go to, a big event, there's always drinking. It's very much just everywhere. And I remember growing up, so um a bunch of people in my family didn't drink for religious reasons, and I feel kind of lucky that I was around that, because when I
Yeah.
sort of went out into the world and became an adult, I went to social functions and it was always like there's a lot of drinking, and I remember being a little, I don't know if surprised about it was the thing, but it was kind of a strange adjustment, and it still sometimes baffles me a little bit just how deeply it is permeated into our culture.
Hmm. And when I became a mother, I was saved from that freaking culture. I'm that's one thing that I think about all the time when I look back, is that I was about to go into college and I was going to be in a campus that was known for being like party central. And I was probably going to be drinking like all the time. And it's so funny that when a child comes into your life, like you have to put aside all of that and you really are set on a new path. And I just thought that needed to be put in there because drinking is just not a priority, for someone that's in their 20s, and that's where it starts for most people at 21, when we're supposed to be getting ready to have a family and have fertility on our minds and just being as healthy as possible. It's no, we're gonna make that 21 the day that we're gonna imprint with being able to drink, and everyone in our culture just associates it with, oh, that's time to drink, and now we're gonna party all the time. And it's crazy the way that's set up, and I'm just glad that I accidentally got my way around that when I got pregnant, before I could get hit with that culture, because she saved me. My daughter did.
Yeah, and the thing about fertility, because you mentioned it for a second, even if you're not trying to get pregnant, taking your fertility is actually a marker of a lot of stuff in a woman's
Exactly.
health. Um, like those monthly shifts are, they actually do a lot for us health wise, and I think
Mm-hmm.
like some young women, when they hear about fertility, they like get really are like, I don't want that, I'm not ready to have a baby, which,
Yeah.
but there's more than having a baby that relates to how like fertility, because fertility is, and I remember reading about this, it's a really good marker of like what your health is like.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about like having good fertility is more than just like getting pregnant. It does have other values, because most of the things you do to like improve your fertility are things that just improve your health in general.
Mm-hmm. Which improves your spirituality, and when you're fertile, your womb is healthy, and the womb is the psychic resonator, and therefore you are more able to judge and discern and find a partner that is suited for you in life and be set up for life. And that's another thing, is the birth control completely sabotages it.
Oh yeah. I was on a pill, and and the person I was dating was someone who ended up being really bad for me. And so I decided to just go off it. And I got into like the fertility tracking and stuff. And after doing that, I ended up meeting the guy I'm with now. We're in a very serious relationship, and we're heading towards, having a family and, that whole thing. And
Aww,
I was, thank you. And it was shocking, like, when I went off it, like, it did improve my health. Right after I went off the pill, it was a big, like, jolt to my system. I felt kind of weird, and, like, for, like, a month or so, I felt kind of, like, sicky and weird, and
Yeah, your
but
body was adapting.
and I was glad I did it. And you want to know what shocked me when I did it is I found out that, like, there are ways to prevent pregnancy besides birth control, which is information that just no one taught me in, like, a sex ed class growing up. And I was like, I feel like it's
Right.
really not giving people informed consent to not tell them that, right? I feel like people should be given informed consent and told, like, this is what the thing does, this is what might happen if you take it, and then, that person be able to make the choice on what they want to do, right? But I feel like with us not telling women that, we're not giving them informed consent, and I think that that's not a good thing, Something I wanted to ask you is, how much healing do you think we need to do physically to, have a good spiritual connection? Because I've noticed pretty much everyone I meet always has things they need to heal, they need to work on. Like, how much healing is, I guess, necessary?
I mean, healing is like an endless journey, at least for me. It's not cyclical. I'm sure everyone's heard that saying, is healing is not, or not cyclical, I meant healing is not linear, it's cyclical. So healing is just a journey. It's like looking at the grand scheme and picking out slowly all these little knots in the web of life, So that's how I see it in my head, is there's so many different things that you can heal from. And it's just constantly figuring out what is holding you back and what is driving you forward. Healing is about finding out who you are and just holding on to it longer and longer and longer, and until you don't let go of it anymore. It's finding truth and beauty and virtue and sticking to it, and finally transmuting all those stuck, stagnant, yucky things that were passed down to you. And it's generational, and it's a never-ending cycle. I mean, I don't want to say never-ending, because I'm sure there's well, yeah, I mean, cycles are never-ending. I put healer in my bio, but I'm healing too,
What sort of steps would you recommend people, like, take first if they're someone who is, deeply interested in spirituality, deeply interested in esotericism, but has, like, neglected that physical side? What, like, things would you recommend them do first to sort of get on track?
I'd say be disciplined and have something that you do every day that brings you back to yourself. So whether that be breath work, stretching, meditation, reading like a really great book, there's so many that can, give you that connection. But I think it's more so about going inward and not so much, reading. I think the best step to take is to put aside time just to be you. And it's not like where no one else is around. You don't have your phone distracting you. And that's another thing, is cutting out distractions. And there's so many distractions. It's like the freaking Matrix job to distract you. Like the TV, just turn it off, There's so many people that are like, I'm like, what are you doing with your life? So turning off, distractions, getting a good diet and not sabotaging yourself that way, and getting closer to the earth. That would be a big one, is, getting out in sun and water and the ground, and just feeling it and letting it charge you, you know?
The distraction thing is such a big one. It's so easy, like, because there's so much stimulation around us constantly, right? There's screens, there's TVs, there's music. Like, people always have something kind of running. And it really does mess with our attention span. And this is one thing that I've directly seen mess with people's spiritual practice. Whenever I've, had someone that I've kind of given spiritual advice to, and I've seen it in my own life, right? Like, when you sit down and meditate or do a ritual or clear your head and do any of this stuff, right? You need to have focus. Focus is a big part of any spiritual practice. And I think the constant hyperstimulation by screens makes it a lot harder for us to get into that headspace and execute spiritual practices. I have said, and this has kind of been one of my, I guess, more controversial opinions. I mean, if you disagree with me, it's very lighthearted. It's not a very serious one. That it's good to not have like a digital timer running while you meditate. If you like the digital timer, that's fine. I'm not gonna like break down someone's door over this. But I found whenever I had that digital phone timer running when I meditated, I would always check it. And I would be thinking about the time and not the meditation. And when I check my phone, you open your apps, right? You open Twitter and then you go on a little rage spiral. You open Instagram and you know what I mean? Like, it just becomes this like overwhelming thing. And I like have been like banning using my phone for a while before I go to sleep. And I have been sleeping better. I have been spending more time in prayer because I like to do a lot of my prayer stuff at night. I don't know why. I like doing my spiritual practice in the evening. Maybe it's because I like the moon. Who knows? And it really did help. Like, of course, you're listening to a podcast, right? You're being digitally stimulated now. I'm not saying you need to throw your phone into the river, though maybe one day I will crack and do it. You know what I mean? But that constant stimulation is not necessarily good for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that all the time. I'm like, I just want to chunk this thing into the ocean. And I just like a lot of times I think about how much more I am open and how much more discovery I get from writing instead of tweeting, because I'm kind of feeling that void of writing to my journal by, writing into the abyss of Twitter. And it's like lately I haven't been tweeting as much because I'm finally writing more. And I realized, oh my God, like everyone should be doing this. Everyone should have a writing practice, because when you express yourself like that, you can get it out of your mind and onto paper. And that's the first step to bringing it into physicality, writing it down. It's literally spelling it, it's manifesting it faster, whatever you want, you should be writing it down. You should be clearing your thoughts daily by, getting them out some way. And tweeting is a good way to get them out and to spread your message and to have that socialization aspect. But we also need a time to go inward, and that would be a good thing to do while you do that, is just writing those thoughts down.
Oh yeah, having like journals and stuff is a spiritual recommendation that I think most of the Western traditions have, and I'm sure some of the Eastern ones do. I'm less familiar with Eastern spirituality, though I've been learning recently. I've been trying to read a bit more and understand those practices a bit better. But every single one recommends that when you start, you get a notebook and you write down your spiritual stuff, like what you're doing. And I think that I've been telling people to take it a little step further, right? Write down what you're doing, what effects you get, and write down just what's running through your head on a daily basis. Like, a journaling practice is really helpful. Even journaling your task. Like, I switched to a paper calendar at the beginning of this year. And I have been keeping, like, basically every day I just write down my to-do list, like, in my little paper calendar, right? It's one of those, like, the page, one page for every week or whatever. Yeah. And it's been great because now I have really good records of my past year. And so every milestone and birthday I just have there to reference. But it's also been good to just get it out. And I found that it has made a difference. And journaling like your dreams, that's a really recommended thing. Like keeping track of all of it. I think writing is really good.
And you start to notice patterns and synchronicities, and you don't notice them before, especially with dreams, because you forget them, and it's all right there if you just write it down immediately as soon as you wake up. Have it next to your bedside. Don't pick up your phone until you do it. And it's so much easier to just have pattern recognition and to realize what is unfolding. And, like, we can predict or what's happening, or, not be as lost that way.
Yeah. And sleep is honestly a really important part of health, and spirituality. Sleep, we spend so much of our life asleep. And I mean, very few people have healthy sleep patterns, right? Whether you have kids and kids are always, or you're like someone who just, you work a lot, you don't sleep a lot, you're a student, you don't sleep a lot. Like, very few people have a really like good sleep pattern. And it does make a difference if you can get rested. I mean, even if you have to, try other sleep patterns or something than the traditional one. I mean, sleep matters, and paying attention to your dreams is important, because interestingly, when you are, and I remember reading about this, when you are having a worse sleep pattern, you remember your dreams less, which, if you want to have spiritual development, is not a good thing, because our dreams teach us things, right? Our dreams contain messages from the divine. And in certain like traditions, there are whole like rituals around dreams. There are certain things that you can allegedly like, bring in your dreams, right? And so it does matter to try your best. Obviously, not everyone, people have other stuff going on, but try your best to have good sleep if you can.
Yeah, because those messages in the dreams, they hit. You can't miss them. You have to try to have those, on a healthy basis, instead of, like, I've heard a lot of people just don't even dream. And I'm like, how? What? That would be something I would be very concerned about. It's a huge part of life. It's half your life,
It's good. And if you are someone who doesn't dream, if you start sleeping better, you'll dream more. I know a lot of people I've spoken to about dreams, they'll dream some nights but not others. And typically when they're anxious or they're sleeping less, they tend to dream less, because the dreams that we actually remember are the ones that we have right as we're going to sleep and right as we're waking up. It's when we're in that like transient phase. And when we sleep, we have a number of these cycles that we go through every night. And so if you have a really, messed up sleep pattern, you aren't completing the cycles. And so that's a big culprit behind not remembering dreams, actually.
It's all about those cycles.
It literally is. Everything is a cycle. I feel like that's like the one thing that everything I look into esoterically teach me. It's like, oh, it's a cycle. It's a cycle. It's a cycle.
Yeah, that circle, the beginning and the end. It's the most divine thing. I'm sitting in a hula hoop right now. I just so happened, like, my daughter dropped it on the floor, and I just realized I'm sitting in a hula hoop.
The cycle is trapping you. The final sort of thing I wanted to like ask you about are, what do you think some of the biggest mistakes people make regarding health are?
When you place your faith outside of your own, divine nature, you're always going to be losing. It's always going to be bad. It's always going to be evil, Health is about nature coming back into who you are as, like, sovereign being. It's not about, shortcuts and anything that's like a shortcut like that.
The last thing I really wanted to ask you is, what like resources or books or things that you think people should look at to better understand the spiritual health connection, or just general things you would recommend for people?
My favorite one right now, well, I have two favorites right now, is Becoming Supernatural and Rudolf Steiner's Science and Occultism Mysticism book. I forgot what the exact title was. Let me find it. But it's those two, with the spiritual and body connection subject, and then with just like physical health, I would say Nourishing Traditions is a huge one. And Sally Fallon, Nourishing Traditions, and then the Rudolf Steiner. Let me find it. Rudolf Steiner. It's called An Outline of Occult Science, Christianity as Mystical Fact, the Way of Initiation and its Results. And it says in the title, like Christianity as mystical fact and then occult science. So it's taking science and applying it to spirituality. And I think that is like step one in, meshing physical with spiritual and understanding the way that works together. So that book is really good. And so is The Becoming Supernatural one, which I already said. But
Yeah, I have read a bit of Steiner. I've always really liked him. I've never read that specific title, so I may check it out myself and let you know my thoughts. I think Steiner has a lot to say. I find him, I would say he's one of the more interesting people to come out of that kind of general theosophy scene. This is the thing about the theosophy scene. Some of those people made really good points, and some of them I think made some pretty awful points that are good to kind of just dodge. But he has some interesting perspectives in general, so I'll definitely check that out. And I'd seen the Twitter people. For some reason I'd seen nourishing traditions popping up a lot on Twitter. So these are all things that I've heard are good from other people. So I trust your opinions.
Definitely good. Nourishing Traditions in itself has so many sources on just health, and she's like, I think she's spiritually well. Other than her views on circumcision, she no, thank you. I do not believe in circumcision. So, yeah, she says, it's more cleanly or whatever. I don't think that's true. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, think that we are born perfect.
See, every person you read, you're always going to have some things that you disagree with them on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, no perfect person is ever going to completely agree with you. And if they do, I mean, get some critical thought, develop nuanced feelings. Like, if you listen to the show, I hope you don't agree with me on everything. You know what I mean? It's all about developing nuance, critical thought, and developing your own opinions. So I guess that's all I really wanted to discuss. I think this has been a really good conversation. Where can people find you? Where's your corner of the internet?
I'm on Twitter, and yeah, I'm on Instagram too, but I haven't launched like a public Instagram yet, but I will soon, and it's going to be the same as my Twitter. So that's Ancestor Aligned.
If you're a listener on the show and want to find me, I am Georgina Rose or Dot Darling. I am on every social media platform under the sun. I'm on YouTube. That's where I mostly hang out. That's the place to find me. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, a Substack. I don't really post on Substack much, but I do have one. And yeah, I think that's most of them. I'm everywhere, and I do this show. You can find this show on YouTube or on most podcasting platforms. It's all over the place. And if you want to support the show and enable me to keep making more of this, you can support us on Patreon. It's under the Postmodern Iconoclast. And we offer a lot of benefits. You get the shows early, you get pre-shows, which are basically solo mini shows that I do. And yeah, you also get your name read off, which is of course the most exciting benefit. So if you are someone who is in that tier and you agree, I don't I have an opt-out system for anyone who doesn't want their name read off for anonymity reasons because I respect that, you know what I mean? Internet's a scary place. But if you are not an opt-outer, thank you to Mary, Ruben, Trevino, Shiraz, Emil, Neva, Emily, Lilith, Serinda, Jonah, Nauseated, and Lee. Thank you so much for your continued support. You keep the lights on, and I appreciate it. So thank you so much. This has been the Postmodern Iconoclast. I hope you're having a good day, night, afternoon, mid morning, mid evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are, and we'll catch you in the next one.